In the autumn of 1967, I sojourned abroad. I travelled to South Africa to see my dying mother, then on to Kenya, and then Israel. I used the time to finish writing love play, the L.S.D-induced lyrical fantasy for the theatre. My characters had no life careers, only life rhythms. There was no exposition, only explosion. No narrative, only patterns. I was inspired by the mad visionary and surrealist Antonin Artaud, who wrote to the theatre as the truthful precipitate of dreams. I came back to London in the late summer of 1968. It was a strange time altogether. The spirit of the time was rampant with discord and mayhem. Chairman Mao's little red book jostled with the embryonic reality of a cybernetic age. Angry anarchists vied with whacked-out weirdos. Reality freaks versus space cadets. Pass the liberation and blow your mind. We were on a freewheeling roller coaster veering from sexual liberation to spiritual upsurges. Helter-skelter from drugs and rock and roll to macrobiotics and yoga. It was the moment to smash the clocks and arrest time. Revolutionary fervor was running amok. Radical situationists were storming the barricades in Paris. Students and the dropout homeless were squatting empty properties. There was violent demonstrations against the war in Vietnam, in Europe and elsewhere. In the USA, black power erupted into race riots. At the end of August, the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia laid waste to the dream of the Prague spring. Wearing a flower in your hair and saying "far out, man," as sure as hell didn't endear you to heavy political heads. Nevertheless, it was good to be back at the arts lab after all those months away and to see my good friend Jim. The lab had drifted towards being a people theatre where we were all performing artists just by virtue of being there. The nice thing about the place that all sorts of interesting people would pop in. Through Jim's largesse, I worked as a makeup artist for Frank Zappa. I went down to Stonehenge on a red double-decker bus with the Pugs, and I sat on the floor cross-legged, rapping with Mama Cass. That September, just a stone's throw from the arts lab, the hippie musical Hair opened and let the sunshine in with numbers like Sodomy and Hashish. We would rush through the auditorium as the show ended and dance on the stage with the actors and audience. The Lord Chamberlain's powers of theatre censorship had just been abolished after hundreds of years. Later that month, I went to Amsterdam in search of a roving street theatre group called The Human Family, which was the creation of the mother of the family, my old friend Jack. They just toured the hip capitals of Europe during the summer, creating their spontaneous happenings at festivals. I met up with them at the Fantasia in Prince Hendrikade. It was like setting foot on some strange film set, watching a surreal movie being made of this new utopia where long-haired tourists lounge on carpeted platforms, sipping moo tea and smoking dope. It was the first of its kind, and Amsterdam was the magnetic center of the new Stone Age. That night, I joined them in their wood-beamed attic above some artist studio, this troupe of ragged, wild-eyed poets and gentle, blissful dreamers in their faded hippie finery. We squatted in a circle, eating quietly our beggar's banquet of rice, fried beans, onions, and carrots. We were a motley crew, some 20 of us from many countries, sleeping in our laced-up bags and blankets. Then it happened. Early one morning we were raided and bundled off to the central police station. One by one we were searched, our belts and personal belongings taken away and locked up in solitary confinement. After the initial outrage, excitement, the perverse pleasure of an absurd situation, I felt calm and relaxed. The endless banging and prolonged screams of my brothers and sisters had subsided in exhaustion. Long hours of random thoughts and growing claustrophobia passed by. Then I heard Sandos, our Italian brother, banging against his cell door and letting out a strange, terrible cry that ended up in uncontrollable weeping. Then there was a deep silence. That night I was taken to the Hook of Holland, where I was deported without having committed a crime, nor been charged for one. Dutch police deport London theatre group was the headline in a Sunday newspaper. That was my rite of passage to the human family. As the cold winter loomed, the casualties of the love generation mounted. The warm glow of the arts lab provided shelter for the shoddy array of the dispossessed and unloved. The walking wounded were turning this once derelict warehouse into a communal doss house. Its proximity to nearby Piccadilly Circus attracted the flotsam of the lonely streets, lost denizens looking for a place to go, to belong. The first devotees of the Hare Krishna movement arrived from America and set up a temple just around the corner. I remember the first ecstatic chanting sessions held at the Arts Lab with Guru Das and Mukunda in their flowing saffron robes and shaven heads. The magic of the place was that it often came alive with spontaneous events and the rich camaraderie of shared ideals. On one occasion, when we were sitting about and nothing in particular was happening, a white Rolls-Royce stopped outside the entrance, and in walked a sombre-looking, gaunt young man wearing a Mao-style blue denim outfit and cap. This was the time of the Chinese Red Guards and the Cultural Revolution. At his side was a petite Japanese woman with long hair, draped in an ankle-length black cape. It was John Lennon and Yoko Ono. They joined us and crouched on the floor with their knees up. One of us went up to them and whispered. John nodded and they got up and went to a back room. Later I asked my friend what had he said to Lennon. He replied, I asked them if they would like to share a joint with me. At the Arts Lab, all was not well. On November the 15th, a notice was posted informing lab people that the human family, comprising 30 people plus equipment, would be arriving on December the 10th. The notice read, they will stay at least until the day after Christmas. During this period, Jack will make the schedule and policy decisions. It was signed by Jim and Jack. It caused outrage, and a group of artists broke away in an acrimonious split. I'll oily stuck by my two friends, and in a statement of support published in International Times, I said, the Arts Lab is alive and well, evolving in a freer form. The space in the building is to be given over more to the people who use it. And I attacked titular heads and control freaks. The first intimation I got that something was afoot was when Jack told Jim to book the Royal Albert Hall, that vast circular space crowned by a dome, for a night in December. All we foot soldiers were told was to say that Leonard Cohen the balladeer and poet who wrote melancholic songs to commit suicide to, would be heading the bill. The event was to be called the Alchemical Wedding, a celebration. A poster was designed by Jack and Bill, another American underground mover. It was a medieval-type drawing of a head with the skin peeled back over the skull, denoting a blown mind, and a finger over the mouth, making the sign to be silent. To cap it all, one evening in early December, a group of heavy dudes looking like Wild West frontiersmen walked into the lab. It was Ken Kesey and the Pleasure Cruise, some deadheads, and two bikers from the Hells Angels chapter in San Francisco. I spent the night sitting and rapping with them, and in the morning I rode pillion on one of their bikes to the Beatles' plush Apple offices in Savile Row. The group occupied an office suite, and we had a great party where all sorts of people popped in during the day. Time seemed to have slipped by, and for it was late in the evening when a figure loomed at the office door. There was silence as he calmly said, "It's nice of you to invite me to your home," reversing the situation. "Are you asking us to split?" said one of the pleasure crew. "Yin yang? Yes, no," answered George Harrison enigmatically. At the time, Ken Kesey had crashed out on eggnog and was sleeping in the basement stairwell. "The revolution is over and we've won," was the mantra. At last it was the day of the alchemical wedding. We foot soldiers had rushed about beforehand, doing all the little things that have to be done, like spreading the word and seeing that flyers were distributed all over the place. I slept at the back of the lab when I could, and one night I collapsed from exhaustion, puking up the Indian curry I had hastily eaten earlier. Nevertheless, here I was on the night of the 18th of December 1968, travelling in a taxi with Jim's secretary from the lab to the Royal Albert Hall, resplendent in my paisley caftan. We sat back and gave a sigh of relief as we crawled through the rush hour traffic. By the time we arrived backstage, the well of the large hall was beginning to fill up. Although nothing was, to my knowledge, planned, a couple of rock groups had set up in case they were asked to play. I could see John and Yoko sitting at the side of the stage. Ken Kesey and his merry crew were hanging around. There were the Hare Krishna devotees and about 4,000 of the most beautiful heads that the underground could muster, waiting in an anticipation for this most auspicious event to begin. The hour had come. The crowd buzzed with excitement, but nothing happened. The audience started to fidget in their seats. There was an air of anxiety about. Then I noticed the small, bedraggled figure of Jack walking slowly through the crowded well of the hall, his finger to his lips, beckoning silence. By the time he had reached the front of the stage, there was a silence only broken by the odd, nervous guffaw or raucous catcall from the back. The silence became long and deep and seemed to engulf us. Then, almost out of nowhere, someone banged a drum. There was an ecstatic cry of joy. The Krishna devotees began to chant, and I found myself swept off my feet by the momentum. The space in front of the stage filled with swaying, swirling bodies, high on the energy created out of the silence. It was J. Henry's finest moment. This was the culmination of what the human family was about. Theatre, in its highest form, was an act of communal magic, that could transcend earthbound reality. Musicians played, poets ranted, and John and Yoko crept into their white sheet-like bag on the stage and stayed there out of sight for what seemed like ages. I watched a baby crawl slowly by. That was the bag happening. All mayhem broke out when a young female member of the audience stripped off her clothes and danced in naked delight. When the police were called and attendants tried to remove her, groups of people started stripping off their clothes in solidarity. There was a retreat and a truce was worked out, and no one was arrested. The nude girl incident with accompanying photo made the front page of the London evening papers. The alchemical wedding had a profound effect on many of us who were there that night. It touched our lives and helped bring about changes. There's a difference between what a person does and what happens by itself. You will set yourself a task with determination and tenacity, and then suddenly a gust of wind will come from another world and everything changes. You seem to be used by the gods, and in spite of yourself, you are part of the myth.